Hello. So I guess I'm kind of doing a little bit of sequels at the moment. I believe last week I did Finding Dory, and then now I'm going to do Planes 2 Fire and Rescue, or just Planes Fire and Rescue is also what it was referred to as, which came out in 2014. This is the sequel to the Pixar's or Disney's Planes that they did a couple of years ago, or a couple of years previously. And as I stated before with that one, it does take place within the world of Cars. So like Lightning McQueen and Mater and, Radiator Springs and all this other stuff do exist in this world. I don't remember if we see any specific references to them at any point in either of the movies, but I know that they are there. Since it's supposed to take place within the same world, which is kind of nice. It's more world building type of a thing, a little bit more world building than just like the Mater's Tall Tales shorts that they've done. And so these movies center around Dusty Crophopper, who is, of course, he's become a very successful racer. As a sky racer and everything like that, and has had a very good career with that since winning the Wings Around the Globe event. As the upcoming rookie newcomer, all of that. This movie takes place, I think, a couple of years later. Not a whole lot longer later, but a couple of years later. And it is, of course, Dusty is still, doing his training, having a fun time in his town, in Fropwas Junction, which is now, proclaimed to be, the hometown of, Dusty Crophopper, winner of the Wings Around the Globe rally and everything. He's going on talk shows, everything like that. So we see pretty much most of the cast from the first movie, or the main cast of Fropwas Junction crew. So we're still, of course, seeing Dusty. We see Skipper is there, and he's still doing flying. We see, Tank. We see Dottie, the mechanic. And of course, we see some of the other people that live in the town and everything like that. We see how proud they are of Dusty and everything. And what ends up happening is one day when Dusty and Skipper are doing training, just flying training like they normally do, something happens with Dusty's gearbox, which is a very important thing inside of a plane. Obviously, it's a very important thing inside of most motor vehicle type things, in the fact that it helps control the motor vehicle in flight or while it's driving or so. And Dusty, spirals down and doesn't quite crash because he gets back under control. But Dottie has to look it over, and she explains that, well, the thing is that you've done a lot of damage to your gearbox, and now it's kind of busted. And unfortunately, that gearbox is out of production, so no other gearbox can be found anywhere. And she's like, it means that you're going to be unable to race again because you can't get up to those speeds anymore for racing. And this is, of course, something that's very important to Dusty. He loves racing. He loves, all of that stuff. Not that he loves racing because of the fame. He just loves racing just because it's a fun thing that he likes to do. It's something that he's dreamed about for a long time. And it's just something important to him in that aspect. And he's very... he gets very sad about this, and we have this, the scenes where we have his friends trying to cheer him up in the, in the local pub and or the local bar, not pub, local bar. We see there's some cars that are square dancing, and there's one guy that's one pickup truck that's complaining about my girlfriend left me for a hybrid. I didn't even hear it coming. And then there's another one that's a pickup truck that tries using a pickup line on another car, and she goes, pickup trucks. So it's just funny jokes that they throw in there. And of course we see Leadbottom, who was, Dusty's employer, before he became a racer. Saying, you can always come back and work for me again, as a crop duster and everything like that. And Dusty, of course, doesn't want to do that. And Dusty ends up going for a flight. And Dottie had installed this sensor on his dashboard that, of course, warning light if his engine could prevent further damage. And unfortunately, while he's flying, this ends up happening. And he ends up, unfortunately, crashing into something at the Prop Wash Junction airport that actually ends up causing a fire. The residents, including Mayday, who is their fire engine, spring into action. Mayday is a much older fire engine, so he's not as, high tech, and, not as many emergencies happen in Prop Wash Junction as they do in other places. And like Mayday rushes in, and they end up having to drop the water tower onto the fire to put it out, which is not a good thing, but they have to do that. And then of course, the fire safety inspector comes in, and he's just like, this is, everything here is inadequate for firefighting. You are not up to spec. Everything here is not up to spec. You need at least one other vehicle to help with your, help with being able to deal with fires and everything like that. And he, the one that comes in and kind of berates Mayday is just, he's doing his job. So you can't necessarily be angry at him, but he's a very by the book type of character. And what happens is Dusty, of course, feels very bad about this because he's blaming himself for the fact of what happened for his own carelessness. Which, I mean, given Dusty's personality that we see in the first movie, is not surprising that would be something that he would blame himself for. But what ends up happening is he goes and he talks to Mayday, and he's like, I'm sorry for what happened and everything. And Mayday's just like, maybe I'm just getting too old and everything. Dusty is looking at this, wall of Mayday's accomplishments. I think we see that he has a Bronze Star, and there's a few other things, and he's complimenting them, and Mayday keeps going, they're rusted, they're dusty, they're old, that was from way back when and everything. And then Dusty sees this picture of what looks like a crop duster, and he was like, well, what's this crop duster doing in the picture? And Mayday is like, well, no, that's not a crop duster, that's a seat. It's a type of airplane that is designed to help with fighting fires. Basically, and I don't remember exactly what seat stands for, but he explains that, this was a plane that was designed to be able to drop either flame retardant or water on fires, so that way they don't spread as quickly, or to help extinguish them. Which, I live in Nebraska. I'm used to seeing crop dusters. I'm also aware of the fact that there are, of course, planes that basically do the similar jobs as what fire engines do, where they can drop the retardant and they can drop the water over, certain areas, so that way they can help, stop the spread of fire. And I was even aware of that even before this movie came out, or before I'd seen this movie. You live in the Midwest, you kind of know about fires a lot. Considering that sometimes when it comes to crops and everything like that, we do have what are called controlled burns, which is just a way of it's burning away a bunch of dead area in a certain part of a crop area, and then it helps kind of rejuvenate the crop area. Which controlled burns is something that just happens in different farming areas. If you're familiar with farming areas, you kind of know about these controlled burns. They're done safely, and of course with the fire department's help and everything like that. And while Dusty is talking to Mayday, he's like, well, what if I go and get certified to be this, firefighting plane? I can do that, and then, because he doesn't have his, he has to, wait until they can find him another gearbox for him to be able to use, because he can't race without that. So he was like, what if I, go and I get certified, and I can come back and I can be the other, firefighting vehicle that we need for the town and everything like that. And Mayday's like, okay, that'll work. And Dusty is kind of one of the people in town that just is really nice to everybody. I mean, there's not really anybody in town that he doesn't get along with, from what we've seen. Even his former boss at the, for the being the crop duster is still his friend. He's just a bit pushy when it comes to the crop dusting. And Dusty decides that he's going to go and do this, and he flies off, because during this time frame, it's supposed to be that Mayday is going to be going through different upgrades designed by Dottie and installed by her, so that way they can get him up to code and everything with being able to help, being a firefighter. During this time frame, there's also supposed to be this, Prop Wash Junction annual corn festival that's supposed to go on, and without the corn festival and the airport, then they don't have everything that they need to be able to have their corn festival. I don't know. And what happens is, Dusty, he flies off, and we get some of these other amazing, aerial landscape that they designed for this. It is obviously based on different areas in the U.S. that planes fly over all the time and everything like that. Hi for the flyover states. Please don't ignore the flyover states. And he's heading out to this place that is called Piston Peak National Park, which is obviously supposed to be a play on like either Yellowstone or Yosemite. And like even there, while he's flying around, we see like this geyser that is supposed to be a reference to like Old Faithful, and like of course, in the Cars universe and the Planes universe, everything is based, lots of different monuments are like based off of different things that look like cars. They have like White Wall Falls, which is, white wall tires, lots of other stuff like that. And like we see Dusty flying over and into the park. And because of course they have to have wildlife in the park, there are deer, but they're John Deere tractors, which is just funny as all get out, and I love it. Because I've seen my fair share of John Deere tractors over the years, and it's just adorable that it was like, well, they're John Deere tractors, and they're the deer that are in the forest in the national park. We never see anything that's like the equivalency of a bear, but it's still funny. And it's supposed to be Dusty is supposed to go to the Piston Peak, fire station area and do his training there, so that way he can get certified. He arrives and he starts meeting everyone that works there. There's, of course, I don't know what kind of planes there are, but there's multiple different characters that we end up meeting. There's a plane called Dipper that is a huge fan of Dusty as a racer, and she has this huge crush on him, and she's slightly creepy. I'm like, I thought he was dating the girl playing from the first movie. I thought that they were together. I guess not. And then we have, there's another plane that I think is supposed to be like a reference to like a military type of plane. I don't know again, that, is called Windlifter. And then there's one that's called Cabby. And then there's a bunch of these other, they're kind of like this kind of a jump crew that are filled, lots of different type of, kind of constructionist type vehicles like plows and kind of bulldozer setups, or different things like that that are designed to be dropped from the plane, and then they land in the burned area or part of the burned out area, and then they start with like clearing out areas in there so that way the wildlife can escape or anybody else can get through, and also just trying to help like put out the flames by like getting dirt on them and everything else. And they like drop out of the plane and everything. And then of course we meet the guy that is in charge of it, that is the head, the commander of this. And that is Blade Ranger is his name. And he does not like Dusty from the get-go. He does not like him at all. And he keeps, he's very unimpressed by Dusty. And he keeps, he still puts Dusty through the training and everything, because he asks, Dusty, he at least has to give Dusty a chance. And Dusty is just not having a good time with training. You have to train with how fast you need to let out, either water or the flame retardant or different things like that. You have to be able to make sure that you're keeping an eye on like where all the different parts of the fire are going at any given time. Lots of different things like that. That's part of your job. So there's lots of training, of course, that goes into that, which is, of course, reference to like the real training that like these, firefighters have to go through and everything like that in the national parks and in other areas around the country and in other areas around the world when it comes to being firefighters. So we see Dusty having to go through a lot of this different training, and it's not like he's like a natural at it or anything like that. So we show him having to work really hard and everything like that. And unfortunately, Blade ends up being rather, very difficult in regards to training him and everything like that. Not being very supportive. And what ends up happening is that, Dusty ends up getting told by, I believe it's like Dipper and Windlifter, that are just like, okay, so meet us here tonight at the main hangar and we'll show you something. That kind of explains a little bit why Blade is kind of a little bit of a hard A. And what ends up happening is, Dusty shows up and like they show him this old TV show that's about a police helicopters in like LA, and it's called Chops. as in like Choppers, which is a reference to a show that was called Chips, which actually starred I was gonna say James Kirk, Captain Kirk. No, just starred William Shatner. Same difference. Same difference. James T. Kirk, William Shatner, same difference. That was about like police officers. And so what ends up happening is, Dusty kind of like sees these, old episodes of this show where like Blade was actually like one of the main characters in the show. And like the rest of the different, he finds out from the rest of the, firefighting crew. It's like, oh, this is basically like a second career for all of us. We all used to have different jobs and everything like that. Blah, blah, blah. I was a lumberjack. I was like a hauler plane, all this other stuff. And, we see a lot of, we kind of get like references to that. And, which is very true. Sometimes being a firefighter is not someone's first career choice. Some people it is, some people it isn't, some people it is a second one. I know that I've seen at times that people that have come out of the military will sometimes go into being firefighters because there are certain things that they learned in the military that are very similar to being firefighters. So, being a second career or a third career in some cases is not surprising. And what ends up happening is, Dusty is like talking with Dusty ends up talking with like everybody back in Proplock Junction, and like he finds out that, oh, well, we found a replacement gearbox. And he's like, oh, that's great. I really needed that after like the really hard day that he had. And he's just like, oh, yay, this will be great. And we do unfortunately find out later on that the said box was like mislabeled. It's not the right type of gearbox that Dusty needs, unfortunately. And during this time frame, we are also introduced to some of the other people that work in the park. Dusty ends up meeting kind of the superintendent of the park that's there, and who is this very business and self-centered orientated probably was like from a very rich company and then took this job because he thought it would be a cushy job and everything, which is not. And what ends up happening is, he recently rebuilt the lodge that's there, and he's gonna have this big grand reopening party, and he sees Dusty, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you're famous. You come to the party and everything like that." And we see them go to the party. That night or whatever. And like Dusty has gone through a lot of training at this point in time, and he's like said, he's like been told, when it comes to fires and stuff like that, or when it comes to flying, it's, you don't want to be flying too late at night or too much after the sun goes down because visibility is very low. Which makes perfect sense for a plane. And there had actually ended up being a couple of different brush fires that happened, and we see them putting them out and everything like that, working together, and Dusty getting trained. And that night they go to the party, and what ends up happening is we see that the guy that is the superintendent of the park, again, he doesn't take his job very seriously. He's more like, oh, I want to do really good at this part of the job because then I can get promoted to something else. And we see that he does not care about anything beyond making the hotel look good, which, I mean, the hotel looks very nice. It's called the Fuselage. Yes, just like with the Cars world, this world is full of puns. And what ends up happening is they end up, we see like the Secretary of State who's there, and like he's actually much more concerned about like actually how the wildlife is doing. And we're introduced to this other car who's like worked at the park for a very long time, and he knows how everything is going in regards to the wildlife. And then we're introduced to this older couple of, I believe it's the husband's name is Harv, and I cannot remember the name of the wife. They're like this old like camping couple. That are like these couple of campers, as in like RV campers. And like, we were here 50 years ago and everything on our honeymoon or whatever. And, it's like, we're, looking all over and everything like that. And we're like having a lot of fun and everything. And like, they like have, have a little nice night talking with like Dusty and some of the other firefighters and everything. And, have just like a nice night talking and everything. And they had to deal with a fire a little bit earlier that day. And unfortunately, the next morning they find out that a bunch of the embers got scattered, and now the fire is just spreading even more. And during this time frame, it ends up being that okay, I'm trying to remember the order that this happens. It is Dusty and Blade end up having to try to deal with parts of the fire, and unfortunately, something happens, and Dusty is like kind of ends up getting trapped because, well, first he kind of ends up getting washed down the river because like his engine isn't doing what it's supposed to do in regard to because of his gearbox and everything. And, you know, Blade has been very hard on him and everything over the, you know, the short time that he's been there. And they end up having to, because of where the fire is and everything, they end up having to kind of take shelter in like this abandoned mine. And Blade kind of ends up getting hurt in this process and protecting Dusty. And, you know, they survive being in the mine, and then like they're able to get, you know, they get like Blade kind of can't fly at the moment, so they end up having to have like Windlifter carry him back to like the base where one of the their mechanic, who is just like this very great mechanic, and he's like the typical like kind of mechanic that can do anything type of a thing, and like he's working on Blade and everything. And Dusty ends up finding out that they have like this kind of like quote unquote wall of fame, and it's like the way that you end up on the wall is that you crash, and that's not a good thing. And Dusty finds out that the reason that Blade left his career on Chips was because his co-star had ended up getting killed in a stunt that had gone wrong on set, and Blade couldn't save him. Blade had been like the first one on scene, and he tried to do what he could, but he didn't know how to save his friends. So that's why Blade went into becoming a firefighter, because that way he knows how to save people, because he's just like, I lost one already, I'm not going to lose anybody else type of is a little bit more of the mentality that we learn about Blade. And he goes through, you know, that's what we learn about Blade. And at this point in time, there's like another lightning storm that happens, and like it causes even more fires to start sprouting up. And Dusty ends up having to, or like it's kind of Windlifter, since he's like the second in command. He's like having to direct everybody, and there's like they have to go and deal with this big fire and everything, and like it's spreading very, very rapidly because the hotel is kind of getting wrapped in flames to a degree. And Cad Spinner, who is the very selfish, you know, superintendent of the park, has basically rerouted all the water to basically do sprinklers all over the hotel, so the hotel does not catch on fire. The other people that work at the hotel are like, that's stupid, you're an idiot, I'm not helping you do that, I'm going to help these people get out of here. And, you know, rerouting all of that water means that the fire planes do not have what they need in order to be able to make the fuel retardant and have, you know, water in their tanks for when it comes to dropping. And what ends up happening is, you know, via where the fire is and everything like that, a bunch of the guests end up getting like trapped in certain areas, and, you know, the planes have to come in, and they have to using what little they have in their tanks, they have to, you know, put out the fires and, you know, get pathways cleared and everything like that for the people to be able to get out. And of course, so they're doing their job. And of course, Harvey and Winnie, who are the two elderly campers, had ended up going to found, you know, the waterfall where they had their first kiss. And unfortunately, they end up getting stuck on this like big suspension bridge. The bridge looks pretty cool, in all honesty, when you see it earlier in the movie. And what ends up happening is Dusty, Blade ends up showing up and like helping Dusty be able to, like, you know, save Harvey and Winnie. And Dusty kind of has to like kind of overcome his fear of going fast again because of his gearbox, because he has to be able to get to refill his tanks and then dump them over the area where like the fire is, so that way Harvey and Winnie can get off the bridge before it fully collapses. Dusty unfortunately ends up going unconscious at this point in time because his gearbox does fail completely and he crashes. And he is airlifted back to the base, where of course the mechanic basically not like reassembles him, but like he fixes a whole bunch of everything. And he ends up, Dusty ends up waking up and he's like, okay. And he's like, okay, so this is what happened. And like the mechanic explained, so I was actually able to make you a superior custom refurbished gearbox for your engine. So it'll allow you to do full performance again and everything, which means that Dusty can now race again, but he is also ends up getting, certified to be a firefighter because Blade certifies him because he was impressed by Dusty's skill and heroism and everything because he had said earlier it takes a special kind of plane to be able to be a firefighter, which I can agree with that because it is one of those jobs where you are obviously putting your life on the line. Every time you go into one of those buildings that's on fire, you're putting your life on the line. So Dusty is, he's, perfectly fine and, everything, he's better than okay now. And he gets to go back to Prop Wash Junction now that he's been certified, and like him and Mayday, and like the fire department and the airport are like reopened and everything. So that way everything's back to, better than it was. And like, they have their big corn festival and everything. And Blade and a bunch of bunch of Dusty's other new colleagues show up to do like some air performances and some stunt work and everything like that at the corn festival. So that's just kind of fun there. And it is revealed that the original superintendent of the park has actually been replaced by the car that actually knew what he was talking about, that had been like this forest ranger there for a very long time. He was replaced, he became the actual new superintendent because he proved that he could do his job. And Cad ends up getting, for his misconduct, ends up getting sent to the ranger park in Death Valley, where he has to be a park ranger. And he is not having a fun time, which is just funny. So that's funny. Not really too much after that. There's some like shorts on the movie, of course, that, kind of just expand the planes and cars universe a little bit here and there. Soundtrack's pretty decent. And then we have the cast. We, of course, have Dane Cook as Dusty Crawlpopper. We have Stacy Keach as Skipper Riley, who is, of course, his trainer. We have Danny Mann as Sparky, who is, I don't remember which one that is. We have Julie Bowen as Lil Dipper, who is the kind of the female plane that has like this crush on Dusty, which never goes anyway. We have Brad Garrett as Chug, who is the oil truck. We have Terry Hatcher, of course, as Dottie. We have Curtis Armstrong as Maru. Don't remember who that is. I'm sorry. We have Ed Harris as Blade Ranger. We have Wes Studi as Windlifter, and Windlifter is kind of based on like a kind of a Native American kind of like aesthetic and everything like that is kind of what he's based on. And I will mention this here, Wes Studi is also in a movie that my dad really loves called Christmas in the Clouds, which is it's a Christmas movie about a Native American run and owned kind of a hotel resort. And I don't remember who Wes Studi plays in it, but he's in it. We have Dale Dye as Cabby, who's just one of the other planes. We have a bunch of the gravel crunchers, as they're sometimes referred to as. We have Regina King as Dynamite. We have Corey English as Pinecone. We have Brian Callen as Avalanche. We have Danny Pardo as Blackout. We have Matt Jones as Drip, who are a bunch of the different little construction construction vehicles that help with like putting out the fires. We have Fred Willard as the Secretary of the Interior. We have Jerry Stiller as Harvey, and I believe Jerry Stiller. First of all, he's Ben Stiller's dad, if I remember correctly. And then he is also, I think he's George's dad on Seinfeld, if anybody wants that reference, the Festivus guy. We have Annie Maria as Winnie, and not really too much else. John Michael Higgins as Cad Spinner. So who's the other random one? And there's a couple of other voices, of course, that pop up as a couple of the other background characters or as recurring characters. So that's what we have here. But definitely one of the shorter reviews in regards to a Pixar movie. I want to say the next one should be. I want to say it's like Cars 3, I think, is the next one. But don't take my word for that one. I don't know if that's exactly right or not. But we'll have the next one next week. I do not remember which one that one is at the moment in recording order. This, I think, is supposed to go up the weekend or the week after the 4th of July or so. So we'll see how that lands for everything. Since I record these about a week in advance or so, week and a half in advance. So I thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you haven't watched Cars for a while, go and watch that, or at least look up the soundtrack. It's a pretty decent soundtrack. So have a nice day, and I hope that, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye! I will never understand why you gravel crunchers want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.